Hey, what's up, everybody? It's been a long day, but y'all, I wanted to share something with y'all. Some of the things I'm learning at my job, and I always try to come on and just do general sharing with you all, as it pertains to leadership and operating with a high functioning cross-functional teams, and this can actually really be helpful, useful tips for anybody. If you've got your own business or you work with a group of people, it could be that you own your own business and you have to work with vendors, you have to work with transportation and logistics and different supply chain businesses. Or again, you work for a big corporation like I do, and you have to work with a bunch of different internal departments. You have to do collaborative efforts. You have to get together and see what's the best overall solutions are for the company. Everybody working together, right? So this past week, I was in leadership again with different departments within the company in which I work. And so I actually loved this particular training. And I've always told y'all, I'm always going to be a student. I don't care what I do, whether it's the student in life or student on the job. I'm always going to be that pupil sitting in the classroom ready to learn. And I'm going to tell you something else I learned while I was in that class. And I want to make sure I'm saying it right. You know how when people talk about, oh, she's got a high IQ, or their IQ is way up there. An IQ test or IQ score doesn't necessarily depict that's how smart someone is. An IQ test is actually a test that measures that person's ability to learn. In other words, they have a high ability to learn. So I was like, wow, I didn't know that. So anyway, that was just something I learned. But anyway, so within this class, one of the things I wanted to talk today about is conflict. Conflict. And our HR department, who are, part of our development, career development, and again, organizational development, they are excellent. I love our HR development team. They just are excellent. They really are. And so what we learned, and again, if you've got a business and you want to use this, and I did talk to my HR team and they were okay with me sharing, but we just went through the leadership training of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's a workshop for team leaders, and it's by Patrick. Ooh, y'all, don't get me to try to pronounce that name. That's who it's by. This, y'all, was excellent. Excellent. Anyway, one of the things I wanted to talk about, again, like I said, is conflict. And the way I received it was, all throughout our life, growing up as children, we looked at conflict as a negative thing. Conflict, refrain from conflict, don't enter into conflict. It's pretty much shunned upon to have conflict. And what are you, whether it's with your family, with your friends, with your children, with your spouse, with your co-workers, or wherever you are, it's not good to have conflict. What I liked about this class is that within that function, you have to figure out and rethink conflict, because sometimes conflict can be good. Because sometimes going into or being in conflict with other people, let's say for this purpose, with people that you work with, because that might be the conflict that's needed to bring about change, to bring about creative juices flowing, collaborative. Maybe having a conflict is what brings people together to communicate and talk about some things. So when they flipped it and said, no, don't look at conflict as being something that you should refrain from. And of course, you want to always have good, productive conflict, if you will. And when you have a mindset that conflict does not have to be a negative thing, conflict can actually be a positive thing, because it causes everyone that needs to be a part of that think tank and say, you know what? I'm actually glad this situation came up. I'm actually glad this problem came up, because you know what? We probably would have never even discussed it or even faced it, because we wanted to refrain from being in conflict or at odds. But look at how it has provided a way for us to be productive. This conflict has caused us to find a better way to do things. And so I thought, wow. And so, we would break out in different groups and talk about the different types of conflict that you may have had with a coworker, or even with your leader, or even with your director, or somebody else that, that you have to work with. It might be limited work, but nonetheless, because, let's just face it, if you work in a specific department, you're cliquish with the people that you're used to working with. And that's true in most work cultures. You might have the HR team, they hang out with the HR people because that's what they do all day. You have people that work in customer service, they hang out with each other. Like if you go out on outings, or you have, webinar meetings, you kind of congregate, But what these type of leadership classes do, they allow you to, let me peer over into, let's see what marketing does. Maybe some of the things they use and utilize that's on the top of mind to get through issues and situations, maybe they can say, you know what? Let me show you, I'm listening to what you may be having a problem with. Let me tell you what we do what we've done, to resolve this issue or conflict. And so when you're able to kind of peer over and you come and you're a part of these type of leadership trainings, it causes people to open up. And you think, man, I'm so glad I met you. I would have never thought that I needed to discuss things with people over here in analytics. Or I never thought I would need to talk to somebody on the financial side of the business. Or I never thought I needed to talk, like I said, to someone in marketing or on the executive team. So I like it that it makes different people within the organization, puts us all at the round table. And when they share and open up about some of the things that they may have endured, and they were able to come to the table. And even though it might be a conflict, if we do it this way in our department, that's going to have an adverse effect with this department. Or if we have an agenda, we have a directive in our department, but then if we don't ever reach across the aisle and say, you know what? We want to implement this, but we want to double check and see how that's going to affect you. And then again, if the conflict is there, that person or that other department can say, well, you know what? You can actually do that, but don't do it on Mondays and Tuesdays, because we're still doing our financial reporting and finalizing things. And if you do it beforehand, it's going to really mess us up. It's going to create a conflict. But the great thing about that is when we've all been invited to the round table and we remember, okay, yeah, this is my department. This is what we do. Because we've opened it up to communication, I can pick up the phone now and call someone in financial. But knowing that, the caveat would be, yeah, okay, you can do all that, but make sure you do it on a certain day. So it's best be at the round table. So, and like I said, I'm just doing, a little just small inference of how a conflict, again, it can be good. Each department can be productive, but you may have to refrain from doing it at a specific time of day. It's not going to necessarily hinder what you're doing. You're just being more conscious that, you know what, the way I was doing it created a conflict, and it created extra work for that other department. And if we get everything lined up, again, by everybody being at the table, at the round table to give input, because that's another form of conflict, and we talk about that. When there's problems that need to be solved, but the people that need to be at the table either weren't invited to the table, or they're not there to give the input. And so everybody is making all these decisions, and it's all for naught. Because the people over here who really need to have input, you didn't even think about them being at the table. So y'all are making all these decisions, and then the person that wasn't there, they'll come back and say, well, no, I'm sorry. Y'all can't do that, because they're not even open for that to happen on this particular day. And everybody's like, oh man, so now we got to undo everything. So again, conflict can be a good thing, because it brings everybody to the table. They can give input, they can adjust, and everybody's happy, or everything is more workable. And one of the things I want to mention to you, this is like one of the exercises we went through when you come upon conflict. The question was asked, what steps can this team take to engage in healthy conflict? And some of the things we discussed, again, when we went into our breakout groups, you need to identify the conflict, okay? And then work toward some guardrails within the conflict. In other words, before we go into it, make sure you maybe have some disclaimers and say stuff like, hey, this is not a boxing match. Every person's point is valid, but please know going into this, everybody's concept may not be accepted. We're all coming to a common goal, and we have to do what works best, okay? And then I put measure things that matter. Because again, when you're dealing with conflict, problems, situations, you don't want to go down a rabbit hole into nothingness. You're winding your clock on something that you can't measure it. It doesn't have anything to do with the conflict at hand. So you have to know how to say, hey team, this is not pertinent. We're talking about what we can do to fix a water issue, and you want to talk about towels on the clothesline. That, you know what I'm saying? In other words, you have to measure that thing to see what matters within the conflict. And again, identifying, setting up rules and or goals or objectives to get through those conflicts, and then again, not spending your time or wasting your time on things that don't matter. Stay focused on the conflict so that it can bring about a resolution. So those are the little things, and we did that throughout the class, doing little breakout sessions, answering those type questions. Again, part of the work that we were doing. And then there was another one where it says, what will you do? What will you do as an individual to help the team engage? So in other words, what are you going to do personally so that, again, a healthy conflict, are you going to, and as a leader myself, as a manager, anytime there's a conflict on my team, you know, I'll give out assignments so everybody's not walking over each other. If we know this part of the conflict exists and it's financial, I might say, okay, I'll handle the financial part because it's more higher level up. So that information I will be privy to have. Whereas somebody else on my team may have to get up and talk with the salespeople. How is this going to affect the customer? So each one of us has a part. So as the manager of my team and leader of my team, I'll say, hey, these are the things that we all need to go work on. I mean, you think about when you look at the different shows and everybody has a task. And then that way, at the end of that, we can bring all this information together and make a healthy decision about what we need to do to resolve this conflict and get through it. So again, we did a bunch of those type of action planning sessions. So again, I'm just sharing that part of working through conflict, healthy conflict. And like I said, there are other things within conflict like conflict, commitment. Okay, again, talking about setting goals. And then whenever you do set those goals as you go through conflict, provide support to your team. Check in, see what's going on. Give them the tools and or information, knowledge to help them through the conflict. Okay, then in conflicts, have accountability. Okay, own what you do. Lead by example. You know, one thing about me as a leader, when I find that there's an issue or problem, again, I'm identifying the problem in issue or conflict, but I also say to my director or to my, you know, whoever that I'm talking with, I always bring a solution. And again, so I've identified the problem, and then I say, okay, based on my expertise, based on my experience, based on my knowledge, here's a good solution to work us through this conflict. Also, there is, I think I said lead by example. Okay? And then results. Okay? What steps can this team take to focus on collective results? Again, the goal is identifying it, commit to what needs to be done to get you through. Like I said, putting up guardrails, that type of stuff. Then have accountability. You know, and I tell my team this too. Listen, none of us are perfect and we're going to make mistakes. But when you made a mistake and you have really created a problem, and it may create conflict, please, especially with your, you know, always be mindful of your other co-workers and colleagues. If this issue or problem, again, accountability, because I mean, you may be the cause of that conflict, right? Make sure you put out an email or communicate, say, look, my apologies that this has occurred. Here are some things I'm going to put in place so that it should not happen again. And I recognize the extra work, time, and effort that this is creating for the team. And then, again, that's that accountability. I'm telling you, I'm sure we all have worked around people and or have lived in your community. It could be in your own house. It could be with your own children, your own, you know, family, where before they take accountability for something, they done told you 900 different things as to why it occurred. Sometimes just acknowledging, taking accountability, identifying that thing putting those guardrails back in place so that hopefully it does not happen again. In other words, you're telling and showing your audience that, hey, I recognize, oops, I screwed up here. However, I don't belittle that error or conflict. I'm acknowledging that what I caused is making you have to, clean up an aisle number 7, 8, 9, and 10. So at the same time, I'm taking accountability for it, because if you sit up here, I think it rubs people the wrong way when you try to over-explain, or you try to, say, well, oh, my cat bit my toenail, or you skirt and dance around the whole thing. Because again, like I said, all of us are not perfect. At some point in our working careers, we're going to make a mistake. It's just going to happen. But I think it's the way you go through it. How do you commit to correcting that issue? And so those are the things, even when I'm talking to my team, just go ahead on and let people know, hey, look, my apologies. I recognize this is causing a hardship on your team to get this fixed and corrected. And isn't that the truth most of the time, even in conflicts? People, when you're trying to undo a wrong or correct a wrong or work through a conflict, people just want you to know your time is valuable. I don't take it for granted. And that's pretty much what it is. And it goes a long way when you can take accountability for something. Isn't that the truth? So anyway, that was just great. I mean, the way we had a different perspective on conflict, because like I said, growing up, nobody likes conflict. We try to refrain, stay away far from it. But think about how conflict can bring about change, necessary change. But anyway, I wanted to just share that with y'all. And like I said, as I'm learning more, as I'm growing more in leadership, I like sharing stuff like this, because people, you never know who's watching you on YouTube, do you? And it may be something that helps somebody. You might be a director, you might be a leader, and your team doesn't know your leadership style. Or as a director, you say, well, I'm the director, what I say goes. But get feedback from your people. And that was another thing we talked about. Get feedback from your people and say, okay, how does this affect you? We know this has to be done. I'm not telling you this so that we circumvent having to do duties and perform. No, but let's maybe talk. Again, let's all come to the round table. So anyway, like I said, sharing is caring. Anyway, y'all, again, that book is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Excellent. This is excellent, y'all. So, I mean, if for anybody that's watching my channel and you're in the HR department and this is something that you want to look into and be able to teach throughout your organization or company, this is a good one. Excellent. All right, y'all. Love you. God bless. And may the peace of the Lord be with you. Y'all have a good one. Bye.